Ladies and gentlemen, as we continue our journey through the Lentra CNBC TV-18 Lending Summit, we have a highly anticipated and exciting session that promises to unravel insights into the future. And as Sir said, our next speaker is a seasoned expert in the financial services landscape and a thought leader in the industry. Please put your hands together and welcome Cyrus Daruwala, Managing Director of Global Financial Services at IDC, who will be shedding light on the India Growth Story 2024.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. No matter how many times you go through this, when somebody's introducing you, you feel a little awkward sitting there. This is home, so it's like homecoming for me. And I'm very thankful to Lentra for getting me back to Mumbai. I'm based out of Singapore. And this growth story, India growth story that I'm going to talk about, is not just an India growth story. I'd like to bring it to you. I'd like to talk about what is it that you see yourself doing along with this growth. Each one of you at a very different, I can say, maturity. Some just starting your job. Some are seasoned CIOs, CEOs, heads of businesses. What is it that you see yourself doing, and what is it that you're going to achieve along with this growth story? Because there are some mind-boggling numbers coming our way. I don't want to repeat majority of the numbers that we have actually been hearing throughout the day. You've heard about how much India is showing up on the global radar. And I stand here as a subsidiary of Blackstone. IDC and IDG Capital is owned by Blackstone. We are $1 trillion of assets under management. A very large chunk of that trillion is in real estate, and a very large chunk of that is here in India. Blackstone, as you know, is a very avid investor, even in various technology decisions. And India's got both. It's got real growth, by which I mean manufacturing and agriculture. It's a huge untapped market. India has growth around technology, clearly. But India also has growth around consumers. And very little was spoken today. And maybe I'll shed some data points with you around the consumer growth story. But again, while you're listening to those data points, I would like you to ask yourself, what do you see yourself doing, whether in the same organization or a different organization, over the next 3 to 5 years? What legacy are you going to leave behind? What is it that you would achieve, and in what field? In consumers, in data, in sales and marketing, and something to do with that growth story. Now, the entire morning we heard about numbers and India growth numbers. Here's another number that we missed out on. In 2022, India got $85 billion worth of foreign direct investments. We were just 12 billion. Blackstone was just 12 billion. But you had government of Singapore, we had the government of Qatar, we had the sovereign funds, we had just about everybody that deals with India investing in India. 85 billion was just foreign direct investments. And I'm not talking about that funny money that comes from Dubai or the funny money that comes from Mauritius. Mauritius is so poor they can't feed themselves. Mauritius comes up with 20 billion in India, and we are like, what? Well, it's actually Indian money coming from Mauritius. But let's not go there. And of course, the UAE, you can say it's India-linked money coming back to India. But nevertheless, it's $85 billion. When we close 2023, it's going to be a little over 100 billion that has made its way into India. Now, if you peel the onion a little bit, you will find out that a huge amount of investments went into agriculture for the very first time. very few people have been focusing. Remember, India used to be the rice bowl of the world, but we lost it when people start selling farms and move away, and when people start, moving to cities for jobs. It begs the question, there's 8.2 billion people. Who feeds us? We are all sitting here very well off. Have you thought of the supply chain so as to who feeds us? Where are these farms and where are these large-scale agricultural outputs? And suddenly the growth story emerges in Argentina, in Mauritius, in Thailand. By the way, Thailand is now beating India when it comes to rice production. I know that because I have a farm in Thailand, and I compete with some of the Indian farmers, and I beat them hands down because of the technology that we have in Thailand. You're now starting to see Bangladesh beat India left, right, and center when it comes to garment manufacturing. So don't be under the delusion that this growth story will continue. We will be the #3 economy, according to all of the forecasts, in the next 3 to 5 years. That's true. But that's the sheer momentum of 1.4 billion people taking us there. Again, I ask you, during this growth, where are you? What creativity, what innovation, what sliver of work that you're doing right now will put you into this global map? Please think along those terms. You know how Parsis don't like working for someone, and I was one of those breeds. So, I had to do something on my own, and here we are. And much like Lentra, we invested in technology startup companies, and they're doing exceptionally well. That's because I believe that there was a gap in the market. And I'm urging you to find your gap in your company or in this growth story of India. Let's bring it back to India. 120 million people, or 12 crore people, are employed by SMEs. And that number is only growing. SMEs and MSMEs are 30% of India's GDP, which means 30% of India depends on SMEs. And these people are growing at an exponential pace. If you don't believe the real rags to riches story, I urge you to look up a vada pav wala in my own town in Pune. His name is Garden Vada Pav, or JJ Vada Pav, and he's actually an internet sensation. You would discount that as an SME, like Cyrus was talking about a vada pav wala. That guy has a turnover of 100 crores. A vada pav owner stall that started off in Pune, close to my Parsi fire temple, has the turnover of 100 crores. You could have discounted him and moved on, but imagine the amount of banking attention that they have, and the loans, and the entire ecosystem, and the whole employment creativity and the supply chain that this one person supports. And suddenly your eyes open up and saying, SMEs are not to be discounted because they are the next big giants that will come our way. Again, it begs the question, what can you do, or what can I do with the SME growth story of India? And then comes, of course, the tech investments, which you're all very familiar with. And I'm not saying tech investments just of Google and Amazon and AWS and Meta, and that is also coming to India in very large proportions. But I'm talking about startups such as Lentra. And though they are 4 or 5 years old, they are a compelling startup that's becoming a so-called medium enterprise, which will, God willing, become, a billion-dollar conglomerate very soon. And there are lots of investments going there into this other emerging tech. And every single one of these success stories, there are 75 failures that you don't hear of. So don't be bedazzled with the startup stories either, and leave your daytime jobs and suddenly rush into a startup. Because for every one that succeeds, there are 75 that fail. Don't be bedazzled by what we call the one-trick pony. Now, wearing the IDC hat, why do I stand before you blatantly endorsing that we have never seen a more integrated, a more robust, and a more secure end-to-end platform than Lentra? There are 3 or 4 or 5 other companies who do what they do, but they are in the category of what we call the one-trick pony. The one-trick pony, I do credit scoring and I do it really well. Good for you. I do lending and I do that really well. I do analytics and I do it really well. None of this matters to the bank because I don't see it that way. I need this whole integrated framework that I can plug and play. That makes Lentra a lot more compelling as an analyst, as an investor maybe, and even as somebody that's recommending that to an Aditya Birla or a HDFC or a State Bank of India. And finally, what will we be doing with this whole growth story? This is where the rubber hits the road. The India growth story is not to give you numbers that may or may not be relevant. If every single one of you is in a financial institution or a non-bank financial institution, it falls upon you to carve out which segment of this growth story will you be pursuing. Will it be construction and infrastructure? Will it be agriculture and agro-base? Will it be education, which is very neglected in India and has huge upside potential? Will it be healthcare and pharma, which is also very rapidly emerging, and we, as a private equity, are investing very heavily into that as well. So these industries all have one thing in common, you and I. The worker, the community, the executive that constantly needs access to capital. Again, that brings to the front the company that's hosting us here, Lentra. Behind growth stories is the need for capital. Behind the need for capital is the ability to identify and disperse that capital to the right people with the right decision. So I'd leave you with what I would call a new terminology, AIDA. A-I-D-D-A. What's your AIDA score? AI standing for artificial intelligence. So the ability to harness Gen AI, machine learning, or some degree of artificial intelligence to understand the customer segment. The D stands for documentation or enterprise content management, a very, very clunky and pivotal part of lending. And the DA stands for decisioning analytics, and hence the word AIDA. So the next time you start looking at your lending capabilities, how do you identify this large swath of untapped customers? They would have a decision, and we saw at the launch and the product launch, they would have products to cater to that. You would go towards your enterprise content and documentation management, the most cumbersome part and the most difficult part and the most disparate part. And that, again, they have a solution for. And then the decision analytics, which is, again, the beating heart of what they do, the ability to identify, score, create a policy, disperse the policy, do the collection, reconciliate the data, and you've got a fulfillment. And it's in near real time. It's very easy to implement. Why do I know that? Because we've seen it with our friends right here. You will hear it from people who are getting awards. And we as an analyst community have been tracking this magical journey of Lentra for the last year or so. So again, like I said, not only were we very bullish on India, when we got the call and we said, why don't you show up and we have a big meeting, I'm like, I'm there, and here I am. So I'll conclude by saying, if you're a part of that growth story, I urge all of you, no matter which industry that you represent or what your role is, to try and identify what is it that I'm going to do here in this company or another company to ride that growth story. Secondly, I'd like you to understand which sliver of this growth story are you going to be a part of. There is no shame in going back to farming. I urge you to look at that, because as people start becoming more affluent, the need for food and the supply for food is phenomenal. And our closest big competitor, China, because they don't have the food source, they are buying out countries. Did you know that China owns 70% of Madagascar? They own 70% of Madagascar. Their food is well hedged over the next 10 years. Even if they stop producing, there is enough food being produced in Madagascar that China will be fed. I'm sure you know that China owns a very large port in Pakistan. China owns a huge infrastructure and port and distribution center in Sri Lanka, and so on and so forth. Why they're doing it? To hedge themselves and the demand for 1.4 billion people, because China is just not producing that much food source. India is soon going to be there. So again, प्याज और दाल आटे का भाव बढ़ने वाला है, and we want to be in the right place, making sure that we are in that right SME segment as well. So India is growing at a big clip. SMEs are the engine for growth. You are a financial institution or a technology company that's servicing this growth story, so you're clearly in the right place with the right partners to be on your side. So I wish you all super success in whatever your growth story. I wish you all a fantastic event, and a congratulations to the award winners that are going to be in front of you. Thank you again.